back to the MMA Training Bible's Guide to Peak Performance. And of course, you know what we covered in the first 4 sessions, and we don't want to dwell too much on that because what really matters is what we cover in this, the last session, Session 5, Programming the Training Sessions. So officially, welcome to the final session, Session 5, Programming the Training Sessions across your fight plan. Specifically in this session, I'm going to show you how to program resistance and endurance training sessions across your entire fight plan, which will include, of course, the general prep phase and the longer plans, and the fight-specific phase and the fight camp and the taper and the transition and all the plans. And we're also going to talk about the types of sessions that you should include in recovery weeks, and we're going to talk about warm-ups and cool-downs. We're going to cover a lot here. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover in this session. And of course, in the longer 12 and 6-month plans, we're going to start with the general prep phase, but we start with the fight-specific phase in the shorter, the 4 and the 3-month plans. And then we'll schedule workouts for the fight camp, and then we're going to schedule the whole taper and the transition, and we're going to talk about recovery weeks and warm-ups and cool-downs along the way. Okay, so if you recall from the Science of MMA course, I taught you how to manipulate factors like work-to-rest ratio to target different energy systems and to build unstoppable endurance, and I shared a whole bunch of endurance workouts with you to that end. I also taught you how to manipulate things like the load and repetitions to develop things like muscular endurance and hypertrophy and strength and, of course, power. And again, I gave you a whole bunch of workouts. It's time to show you how to place those workouts into your training plan to develop peak performance. Now, our general approach here is really in this pyramid, and I want to talk you through it. Again, we covered this before, but we're going to recap just so we're on the same page. Now, at the base of the pyramid, we focus on developing the aerobic energy systems alongside muscular endurance. This foundational work occurs mostly in the general prep phase, which it's always found in the longer plans. Again, it's not found in the shorter plans because we assume that fighters who are competing in a few months have adequately developed their fitness in this capacity. But we also focus on these goals in the transition, so it's not the end of the world. Now, after we shift focus to aerobic glycolysis alongside muscular hypertrophy as we move up this pyramid, now this shift happens towards the end of the general prep phase in the longer plans and at the beginning of the fight-specific prep phase otherwise. As we ascend the pyramid and move through the fight-specific phase, we start to focus on anaerobic glycolytic energy systems as well as the development of muscular strength and power. And as we move into the fight camp and taper, higher intensity efforts focus on the ATP-PCR system, which, again, even though it's an anaerobic energy system, you can still develop the aerobic energy systems when you train it, so that's why we do it. Also, because of course MMA requires a combination of muscular endurance and strength and power, we focus on all of those in the fight camp and taper. Okay, so now I hope you understand our general approach here. Now, what I'd like to do now is go into a bit more detail about how we assign specific workloads to specific phases and specific workouts right across your whole fight plan. Now, I've created a document called the MMA Training Bible's Guide to Peak Performance that assigns different workouts to different phases of your fight plan. And you can download this in the Document Center, but I'm going to go ahead and open it here and we can look at it and see how it's structured. So let's bring it up. So here's the title page, the first page you'll see, Programming Across the Fight Plan. When you download this, it's a little disclaimer here. And then here's the table of contents. You can see it's broken down. We have general preparatory phase workouts, fight-specific preparatory phase workouts, fight camp workouts, taper workouts, transition workouts, recovery, warm-ups, cool-downs, and flexibility. We talk about the fight simulation. I also give you sample resistance training workouts, A, B, C, D, and E, if you remember that. And I give you the training log template. And I also think it's important to remind you of important things like, say, for example, overtraining signs and symptoms. But this is the first thing that we want to talk about right here. Okay, so remember, you only have the general prep phase and the longer plans. Also, all of this should seem a little bit familiar because we covered it all in detail in the Science of MMA course. So I'm only going to give you a review of this document just to save a little bit of time. And if you want, of course, more details about why these workouts are structured the way they are, I suggest that you go back and rewatch the Unstoppable Endurance lecture for a full description of the endurance workouts and the explosive strength and power lecture for a full description of those resistance training workouts. And also you should rewatch the flexibility and warm-ups lecture because I'm sure that will help you out too. So okay, let's give you a little overview of what we're looking at here, and let's start with the top. Let's talk about endurance workouts. So as I mentioned, you can see at the top of this table, it shows you workouts that you can use to build endurance. The main headings include the work to rest ratio, the work interval, the rest interval, the metabolic target, which we'll use in your fight plan. That's pretty important. And there's a few example workouts, and I hope you find those useful. And most importantly, the phase of training that each workout should be placed into. Now, in general, workouts at the top of the table are scheduled earlier in the general prep phase. Workouts lower in the table should be scheduled in the middle and later stages of the general preparatory phase. Now, what you'll notice is that the work interval is longer at the beginning of the general prep phase and it gets shorter as you go along. In this way, you increase intensity across the general prep phase, and the rest interval also actually increases. The one exception to this, it's the last row here, which features a work to rest ratio of 1:3 to 1:4, which we use across the 6-month general prep phase as well. So all you need to do is refer to your fight plan to determine whether you're in the early, mid, or late phase of your fight plan. Then simply select the appropriate workout and just put it in there. Now, as you can see, the bottom half of this table shows resistance training workouts. The headings include, as you can see, training load, training volume, rest intervals, exercise selection and order, along with the sample workout, followed by the phase of training again. Now, the training load, it's important to note as we'll use this as a goal in our fight plan, and we're going to talk more about this shortly. Another important thing to note here in the example is the workout. Now, if you recall from the lecture on building explosive strength and power, I shared a document with you titled The MMA Training Bible's Guide to Explosive Strength and Power, which we covered training techniques and we provided you with a whole bunch of sample workouts. Now again, just for simplicity, I've taken those sample workouts and placed them at the end of this document. I think it's around page 11. So here, importantly, when the table is referring to workouts A or B or C or D or E, just simply jump to page 11 or wherever it is in this document just to see what it actually entails. Now, if you need further description of the techniques, you'll need to go back to the original document titled The MMA Training Bible's Guide to Explosive Strength and Power, which covers training techniques in great detail. And again, that can be found in the Science of MMA course, which you should have access to. Now, the most important thing to note here is that the emphasis shifts from developing muscle endurance early in the general prep phase to muscle hypertrophy towards the end of this phase. And you can see how the load and the repetitions should change to meet these goals here. Okay, let's move on. So as you can see here, we have the same setup in the fight-specific phase. So let's talk about endurance workouts first. Again, as you progress through this phase, the work-to-rest ratio increases. Also, you should be slotting endurance workouts in your fight plan from the top of the table, moving to the bottom. And again, you can use the phase of training guidance on the right side of the table to help you do this. So for example, if you have a few weeks focusing on, say, 2-minute intervals, then you drop the work interval to, say, 90 seconds, 80 seconds, 70 seconds, and you'd be working with intervals in the 60, 50, and 40-second range by the end of that phase. Now, in terms of resistance workouts, you start the fight-specific phase with a focus on muscle hypertrophy. That's somewhere in the region of 6 to 10 reps. And then you move to strength in the middle of the phase, which is somewhere around 5 to 6 reps. And then you finish out with a focus on muscle power in the late phase. And again, you can refer to page 11 to 15 in this document to learn about the specific workouts that we recommend. In this case, as you can see, it's A through E. Now importantly, you should also incorporate the fight simulation in this phase, and this simulation is described in more detail on page 10, so let's have a look at exactly what this is. So we'll just scroll down to the appropriate section, and here we are. Okay, so importantly, the goal of the fight simulation is to mimic the demands of a typical MMA match, which it can be 3 to 5 5-minute rounds. Now the structure of this workout, it looks a bit complicated, but it's pretty simple. You're always essentially pairing a resistance movement with an endurance movement. And there are a lot of ways to progress this workout, but let's give you the simplest example. And again, it's shown here at the bottom of the table. So let's say that you've done this a few times and you're able to complete 5 rounds. Each round here is shown across the top of the table. Each round is made up of 5 blocks, which always pair a resistance movement with an endurance movement. And you have the flexibility anytime to choose anything that you like. This is, again, just an example. Now, as you can see here in round 1, the first block, we're pairing the power clean with the treadmill, specifically running, followed by 60-second rest. So you'd perform the power clean for 30 seconds, then go right to the treadmill, run for 30 seconds, then take 60 seconds of rest. Then after that, you move to block 2, which pairs the bench press and shadow boxing, each for 30 seconds, again followed by 60 seconds of rest. Then you move on to block 3, which pairs back squat with an ab exercise called bicycle, and then block 4, which pairs bench over row with pad striking, and then of course block 5, as you can see here, which pairs an ab movement with skipping. Now after you complete block 5, you take 60 seconds rest, then move to round 2. Now round 2 features 5 more blocks, and you can see the pairings here. You basically continue this until you've completed 5 rounds in this case. And so, of course, there's a few ways that you can increase the difficulty in this workout. One, it's by reducing the rest between blocks. Here, we're using 60 seconds rest, but as you get fitter, as you want more of a challenge, you'll reduce the rest from 60 seconds to 45 seconds, to 30 seconds, to 15 seconds, to ultimately no rest at all between the blocks. Now, the next way to increase the difficulty, if you want to, is to increase the number of rounds that you're completing. Anything from 2 to 5 is reasonable, but it really depends upon how fit you are. You want to start on the lower side. And there are lots of ways to progress this workout. You can increase the difficulty by pairing more challenging exercises together, or using more resistance, or working at a higher pace, for example. You could also adjust the work time for the resistance movement and the endurance movement from, say, 15 to 45 seconds. It doesn't have to be 30 seconds. Now, you're really only limited by your fitness and creativity in this exercise. That's why I like it so much. So let's go back up and talk about the next grouping of workouts. Fight camp workouts. So just like the fight specific phase, you'll find the fight camp in all of the plans. So let's talk about endurance workouts here. Now again, as you progress through this phase, the work to rest ratio increases. You should be slotting in endurance workouts in your fight plan from the top of this table moving to the bottom, and again, you can use the phase of training guidance on the right side of the table to help you do this. You can see that you're moving essentially from 30-second intervals at the beginning of the fight camp down to really short intervals in the 5 to 6 second range by its end. Now for resistance training workouts, you need to focus on muscle endurance, muscle strength, and muscle power equally throughout the fight camp because they're all individually trainable and they're all pretty important on fight day. And again, you can refer to pages 11 to 15 in this document to learn about the specific workouts that we recommend. And again, in this case, it's A through E. And again, you have the fight simulation. You should incorporate this throughout this phase. And just like the fight camp, you'll find the taper in all phases and all plans. Now remember, the goal here is to drastically reduce volume and maintain intensity. And we have specific workouts that you should include here. So for endurance workouts, this involves using very large work-to-rest ratios to maintain intensity while dissipating fatigue. You should be slotting endurance workouts in your fight plan again from the top of this table moving to the bottom, and again you can use the phase of training guidance on the right side of this table to help you do this. And again, you can see here that you're hovering around 30-second intervals right down to intervals as short as 5 to 6 seconds in the taper. For resistance workouts, we focus on muscle strength and muscle power equally through the taper. Now again, you can refer to page 11 to 15 in this document to learn about the specific workouts that we recommend, and again, in this case it's A through E. Now, important point for the fight simulation. I don't recommend that you do the fight simulation during the taper because it can really build up a lot of fatigue, but some people really feel like they need it, so if this describes you, maybe just fit it in during the first week of the taper. Okay, let's talk a little bit about transition workouts. Now remember, after the fight comes the transition, and it's all about dissipating fatigue and recovering from any injuries you picked up during the fight, and of course from this long training plan. And again, we always program workouts from the top of the table to the bottom. So for endurance workouts, this means focusing on oxidative energy systems and longer work intervals, somewhere in the 5-minute range is good. For resistance workouts, this includes a focus on muscle endurance early on, followed by muscle hypertrophy and strength as you move through the phase. And for the fight simulation, I don't recommend that, again, you do the fight simulation. I don't recommend you do any fight-specific movements or training in this whole transition period, including the fight simulation, because this is really a time to get away from all your fight-specific activity. You need a mental as well as physical recovery here. Okay, let's talk about a couple other points here now. Recovery workouts. These should be incorporated throughout your entire fight plan during recovery weeks. Now, the main goal with these workouts is to allow you to recover from intense training weeks without experiencing any detraining. So you really have a lot of flexibility what you can choose here. For example, you could include non-contact, intermittent high-intensity games if you want, like basketball, or even focus on your Olympic lifting technique, which is very useful. You could also include lower intensity whole body movements like running or swimming or cycling, or depending upon your fitness, you can include more organized intervals like those that are shown here. Now, in terms of warm-ups and cool-downs and flexibility, for easy reference, I've included a brief word on warm-ups and cool-downs here. But remember, we covered this in a lot more detail in the Science of MMA lectures, so if you're confused, if you want an update, go back and watch those. Now for flexibility, this is just a quick reminder of the structure of a flexibility workout. And again, you should refer to the lecture on the Science of MMA course and the stretching techniques document in particular for more details here. All the information is there. And the remainder of the document, let's just quickly scroll through it so we have a look. So we covered the fight simulation, so you know what you're getting there. Again, these are the example workouts that I showed you. Resistance workout A with the pictures, so you know exactly what to do. Resistance workout B and C here, and D and E. And then I gave you a brief little cheat sheet with the resistance workouts. Also, if you wanted to write in your loads, reps, sets, and rest here, all of those shortened. I've given you the training log. And again, I've mentioned again overtraining signs and symptoms. There's one last thing that I wanted to mention before we get back to this lecture here. Now, we talked about how you progress your endurance and resistance training workouts in detail in the Science of MMA course, but just as a quick reminder, it's all about manipulating overload. And there are lots of ways to apply the principle of overload. If you recall, you can increase the number of exercises or sets or repetitions. You can change the rest periods. You can increase the sessions per week or even per day. You can increase the training load, that's the weight or resistance you're using, but remember, you must be cautious and conservative. You can progress by increasing the overload by using a couple rules that we talked about. You can use a 2-for-2 rule or the quantity of load increase. Okay, so let's get back to the lecture and get on with the next phase, which involves walking you through an example of how we actually program across the fight plan. Okay, so now it's time to bring this home. I'm going to walk you through an example of how we take the workouts that I just showed you and plug them into a fight plan. Now, right off the bat, you should know that there is not one right way to do this. There certainly are some wrong ways, but as long as you follow our general approach, you stick with me, you're going to be fine. It's also important to know that you don't need to program workouts across your entire fight plan right now. I'm going to show you everything across your whole fight plan, but you don't need to do that now for you. So much can happen in a short period of time that it doesn't make sense to plan so far into the future. For example, your work schedule might change, social and family life can change, and of course your adaptation to training will change, and all of these factors will influence how often you can train, also what you can do in each session. And so for these reasons, you really only need to plan 2 weeks out and really not more than a month out if you really want to get crazy. I recommend, again, just programming workouts in the sub-phase that you're about to complete. Now, just to be thorough, again, I'm going to take you through an example of programming a whole fight plan so that you can see how it's done. I recommend that you keep on coming back to this lecture as you program your sub-phases until you get the hang of it, and I'm sure you will. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this specific example, the step-by-step process. Okay, so to save a little bit of time, I've gone ahead and I've filled in this entire fight plan, so it will look different from where we left off in the last session, but don't worry, I'm going to take you through everything that I've done. So, the first thing that you should do is schedule when you'll complete our testing battery. You should plan on going through this testing battery, certainly before you start this plan, because this will serve as a baseline for measuring all of your adaptation to training as we go through everything. After this, I recommend that you schedule the testing battery every 1 to 3 months or so. So let's go through this example and you can see when you've done it. So here we're looking at the general preparatory phase. You can see we've slotted in the testing dates, one at the very beginning of the plan, then we slotted in another one somewhere around sub-phase 4 at the end of that sub-phase before we get into sub-phase 5. And then we've scheduled another one at the end of the general preparatory phase in sub-phase 6. Let's scroll across and let's have a look at the next phase. This is the fight-specific preparatory phase. And so again, you can see we've scheduled another testing battery at the end of the 8th sub-phase, and then again at the end of the 10th sub-phase. And then there's one more scheduled at the end of the 12th sub-phase. And then that, of course, brings us to our fight camp. So let's scroll across here. We can see the whole fight plan right to the end. And so in the fight camp, we've scheduled one testing battery, and that's at the end of the 13th sub-phase. And then there's one final testing battery at the end of the transition. So let's scroll all the way back to the beginning here. Now, separate from this, I recommend that you schedule the testing battery at the end of a recovery week to ensure that you're always adequately recovered and free of fatigue. This will help make sure that your results are just a little bit more comparable. And again, you should refer to the lecture on the science of MMA in that course for details conducting this testing battery. Everything that you need is there. Okay, so after you've set your testing dates, you should write in your resistance and your endurance training goals across your fight plan. So let's go ahead and I'll show you what I've done here and you can follow along. So first off, you want to start with the general preparatory phase, which is what we're looking at here. And so for resistance training, you should be focusing on muscular endurance in the early to mid phase, and you'll transition to muscular hypertrophy from the mid to the late phase. And for endurance training, you'll focus on aerobic oxidation in the early to mid phase and transition that to aerobic glycolysis in the late phase. So let's move over to the fight-specific preparatory phase and let's see the training goals here. Okay, so for resistance training, you'll focus on muscular hypertrophy and strength in the early to mid phase, and then you'll move to transition to more power training from the mid to the late phase. And for endurance training, you'll focus on aerobic glycolysis in the early to mid phase, anaerobic glycolysis in the late phase, and you'll focus on buffering workouts throughout this phase, along with the fight simulation. Let's move over to the next. Now, for the fight camp and taper, for resistance training, you'll focus on muscular endurance and strength and power training really evenly over the first 6 weeks of the fight camp. Then you transition to maintenance work for the last 4 weeks, which includes your taper. Again, this is because any training that you do in the 4 weeks or so before your fight will bring about an adaptation after your fight, which is rather useless. So rather than adaptation, we focus on maintenance of what you have and on dissipating fatigue to bring about a peak in your performance for your fight. And so for endurance training, we focus on the ATP PCR system and buffering workouts and the fight simulation over the first 6 weeks of the fight camp, and then again transition to maintenance. For the actual transition itself, really you want to focus on recovery. That's the main thing. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of the plan and let's focus on the next thing. Again, actually I might point out, you should be pausing this video and filling in your fight plan as we go along. Let's scroll back, as I'll assume that you're doing that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the sub-phases as we go. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here, so bear with me. Okay, so here we're looking at the zoomed in view of the general preparatory phase. The next thing that we need to do is schedule workouts for the first sub-phase. So you're going to need to first off decide on how often and on what days you can work out. Now here we're just focusing on your endurance and resistance training workouts, but you obviously need to build this around your MMA specific training workouts. And I can't tell you what the magic number is for you. I can only suggest that you need to have open communication with your coaches to determine whether your time is better spent adding a resistance or endurance session or picking up perhaps another MMA specific session. I'll also remind you that it's better to start out with less sessions and work your way up, and this is a conservative approach that can help you avoid overtraining, which we're really concerned about here in MMA. It's rampant. Now, this is also a good idea if you consider spacing out your workouts across the week. That can give you a little bit more recovery time. Okay, so subphase 1 is a developmental subphase and it features a 1-to-1 loading plan. So in this example, this fighter is incorporating resistance and endurance sessions in week 1. Now, once you've decided on what days you'll be working out, you can simply shade in the blocks up to the training difficulty line that we drew in the previous session. Again, I recommend starting off with the testing battery, which is shown here as the first workout. So if we go ahead and scroll across, you can see right here, that's your performance testing battery. Now, the next one is your endurance session. So this is scheduled here, in this case for Wednesday. It features 2 to 3 times 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off with 1 minute buildup. Now, just as a reminder, you'll complete the 5-minute work intervals doing whole body movements like running, then take 2 minutes off of complete rest. Then you start to jog lightly and you slowly build up your pace over the last minute until you are running at your interval pace when the minute ends. And this makes sure ultimately that you're not starting from a dead stop. It can reduce injury risk. And here, this is your resistance training session. So in this case, it's scheduled for Friday. This fighter, they're working with 14 to 16 repetitions, 2 sets with 30 seconds rest in between each, and they're using workout A. Now, of course, I recommend that you write this down in your training log so you can keep track of your progress. So here you'd write down the type of workout you're doing and the sub phase and the training week, just to stay nice and organized. So that's training week 1. In this case, training week 2, it's a recovery week. So let's go back over and have a look here. The endurance session here features 10 to 20 minutes of light whole body activity. And then the resistance workout that will focus on Olympic lifting techniques. And it's not a workout, you're just practicing technique. And this is going to be very useful as the program progresses. And everyone has technical deficiencies, and so there's lots of things that you can do for this recovery workout, and I think that this, in this fighter's case, was a perfect use of their time. So that's it for the first subphase. Let's go on and have a look at the next subphase, subphase 2. So here we're looking at another developmental subphase, and it has a 2-to-1 loading plan. So here we're also in week 3. So let's have a look. The endurance training session here, we're using 3 to 4 5-minute intervals, 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off with a 1-minute build-up, and again it's a whole body movement. For the resistance workout, again we're sticking to that same plan. It's 14 to 16 reps with a volume of 2 to 3 sets and 30 seconds rest. Now what you're noticing here is we're shifting to a different workout. Last time we did workout A, now we're moving to workout B, which increases variation. And then we go into week 4, our endurance workout, 4 to 5 times 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off with a 1-minute build-up. Again, very similar patterns. And then it's the same thing with the resistance workout, 14 to 16 reps, 2 to 3 sets, 30 seconds of rest. But again, we're shifting the workout to add variation. We're now using workout C. And then again, we have our recovery week. We see this pattern. And again, it's the same type of recovery workouts. You can see the endurance workout that we're selecting here. And then for the for the resistance workout, we're going back to technical proficiency. So let's move on to the third subphase. Now, what you're going to notice here is we're sticking with the same reps for our first resistance training workout, the same volume in terms of sets roughly. We have 30 seconds rest, and we're alternating the workouts back to workout A. And our endurance workout stays roughly the same, 4 to 5 times 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 1-minute build-up. But the big difference here is that this week we've added another resistance workout. And again, certainly we're shifting the workouts here. As we move into the 7th week in this third subphase, we stick with that same resistance workout paradigm, 14 to 16 reps, 2 to 3 sets, 30 seconds rest, and we change the workouts, now workout C. And then we have another endurance workout, very comparable. We've actually decreased the volume here in this one to 3 to 4 sets because we're going to be doing another endurance workout, and we want to make sure that we're slowly controlling the volume. So rather than 4 to 5 sets, we're just bumping it down to 3 to 4 sets of 5 minutes on, 2 minutes off. And I just skipped over this one, but it's the same story. We're doing 2 resistance workouts. And then as we move into this this third week of this third subphase, you can see how we're increasing difficulty here. We're going with the same resistance training paradigm, 14 to 16 reps, 3 to 4 sets with 30 seconds rest. And then the endurance workouts were 3 to 4, 5 minutes on. We've decreased the rest here now down to 1 minute off with a 2-minute build-up. And so that alone will increase the difficulty, just a small amount, but it's going to be enough for us. And then again, a very similar loading plan. We've increased the number of sets maybe by 1. If we move back here, yeah, so we're at somewhere around 3 to 4 sets. And again, we're at 3 to 4, 5 minutes on, and again, we've decreased the rest here to increase the difficulty. And so in this way, we're slowly and progressively increasing the training difficulty across this subphase, and then we have our same recovery week pattern here with an endurance workout, nice and light. And then we're again focusing on technique with our Olympic lifts, which is going to be pretty important later on. Let's now have a look at the fourth subphase. So the big difference in this subphase is that we are decreasing the work interval here. We were at 5-minute work intervals, now we're down to 4-minute intervals, and that is enough to increase the intensity, and that's our approach here at the MMA Training Bible. So we're doing 3 to 4, 4-minute intervals on, 3 minutes off with 1-minute build-up. You need more rest to dissipate the fatigue associated with that higher interval. And our resistance paradigm stays the same, roughly 14 to 16 reps, 2 to 3 sets, 30 seconds rest, and again we're shifting those workouts. And we're back to that same endurance pattern, 3 to 4 times 4-minute intervals, 3 minutes off with a 1-minute build-up, whole body movements. And then we're sliding in another resistance workout at the end of that week. As we move into week 11, in this subphase, the second week, then the big difference here is that we're increasing the number of reps that we're doing. So for endurance workouts, we were doing 3 to 4 repetitions. Now we're up to 4 to 5. And so that's enough to increase the training difficulty from week 10 to week 11. And so that's the pattern that we're working with here. And this week, 4 to 5 intervals, 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off. We've also decreased the rest. And then the resistance workout stays roughly the same. And then we're over here to our endurance workout. It's the same pattern as the first one this week. 4 to 5 times 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 2 minutes build up. And then it's the same resistance workout. And then as we move into this third work week in this fourth subphase, we can see our endurance workout. We're at 5 to 6 intervals, 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 2 minute build up. And then for our resistance workout, again, a very similar pattern here. We're alternating the workouts. And then for the next endurance workout, same as the beginning of the week, 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 5 to 6 of those. And then there's our resistance training workout again. Again, we're shifting the workouts, workout C here in this case. And then we have our recovery week, which for this fighter, it's featuring that same endurance work, followed by the technical development. Why don't I slide over here a little bit. Okay, so let's have a look at subphase 5. Again, this is a developmental subphase with a 3-to-1 loading plan. So in week 14, we're slowly increasing training volume and intensity across this fight plan. That's reflected here. This subphase features endurance intervals in the 3-minute range, starting off with 5 to 6 intervals. And this work is performed twice this week. And for resistance training, the reps fall roughly in the 12 to 14 range, which means that the load is increasing. And this means we need more rest. So we're looking at 30 seconds to 45 seconds, that should do, along with about 2 to 3 sets. And so this structure is maintained in both resistance workouts. So let's have a look here. So you can see here's our endurance workout for this week, followed by the resistance workout. Again, you can see here it's the 12 to 14 reps, so we need more rest. Back to that same endurance pattern. Again, you should be noting 5 to 6 intervals of 3 minutes on, 2 minutes off here. And then we're back to the same resistance training workout. Now, as we move into week 14, or 15 rather, training difficulty increases, and this is mainly achieved by increasing the number of intervals in the endurance workouts. Now we're up to 6 to 7 3-minute intervals. That's twice a week. And resistance training remains the same here. So if we scroll through, see resistance training is the same. Again, we're shifting that workout though. We're on workout C here. And there's another example of the endurance workout. And then there's the resistance workout. Now, for training week 16, training difficulty here remains flat during this week, so everything essentially remains the same as the previous week. For endurance training, we're still using those 3-minute intervals, but the rest increases to 3 minutes with only 1 minute build-up. And for resistance training, everything remains the same. So if we just scroll through here, you can see 12 to 14 reps, 2 to 3 sets, 30 to 45 seconds rest. Pattern continues here and here. And you can see we're back to that normal pattern for our endurance recovery and then focusing on resistance technical proficiency. As we get to subphase 6, this is our first shock subphase and it has a 3-to-1 loading plan. So for endurance training, we'll drop down to 2-minute intervals for 5 to 6 sets. And for resistance training, as you can see here, we're working in the 10 to 12 repetition range for about 3 to 6 sets. And this pattern continues into the week. As we can move across here, there's the same endurance workout as you can see. And then our resistance training workout. And here, again, you can see it's 6 to 7 2-minute intervals on, 7 minutes off with 1 minute build-up. And we scroll over here, 10 to 12 repetitions, 3 to 6 sets, 45 to 60 seconds rest. And then we continue this pattern here. Again, as the interval drops down, then you really do need to increase that amount of rest so you can dissipate the fatigue and perform at a high level of intensity to target those energy systems that we really want to target. And then there's a resistance training workout. Now, week 20 features an increase in training difficulty, and this comes from an increase in the number of endurance training sets. Now we're in the 7 to 8 range, but we also incorporate the fight simulation at the end of the week, and you can see the workbook for a full description, again, of options here. But the most important thing to note is that we're going to go for 3 rounds. So that one is shown here. There's an example of the fight simulation. But let me just scroll back. So there's the resistance training workout, still in the same rep range. There's our endurance workout, and then we have a resistance workout, and then the endurance workout. And then again, we have the same pattern for our recovery week as well. The very important recovery week after this very difficult shock subphase. This is very critical to make sure that you're dissipating fatigue from all this high intensity, potentially high volume training as well. Okay, let me scroll over here just a little bit. So this brings us into the fight specific preparatory phase, and here we're working with the developmental subphase with a 3-to-1 loading plan. Now for endurance training, we'll continue, as you can see here, we'll continue with our 2-minute intervals, but our rest drops down to 2 minutes off with a 1-minute build-up. So this certainly increases the difficulty. You don't have as much rest to recover here, but that allows us to work on other biochemical pathways, which we need if we want to be performing at the top of our game come fight day. Now in week 22, this will be completed for 6 to 8 sets. Now for resistance training, let's move over here. This will feature heavier loads in the 8 to 10 repetition range for 3 to 6 sets. And so we're bumping the rest up. You need to recover from this, so you're looking at 60 seconds to 75 seconds of rest. And this pattern continues in the next workouts of the week. You can see here. And then we move into week 23. So the increase in training difficulty in week 23 comes from increasing the number of sets completed in the endurance training sessions, and it increases to 8 to 10 2-minute work intervals. And resistance training remains about the same, so I'll move through those so you can see those examples. Here's our second endurance workout, and then we're back here for the resistance workout. Now, for week 24, the increase in training difficulty, it again comes from increasing the number of sets completed in the endurance training sessions. It increases to 10 to 12 2-minute work intervals here. And there's also another fight simulation for 3 rounds at the end of this week. So if we just quickly scroll through here, that's a resistance training workout, same pattern. There's the endurance training workout with the same pattern. Another resistance training workout. Obviously the workouts are again switching. And then at the end of the week we have this fight simulation. And so there's a lot of difficulty in this last training week. So again, I'll really emphasize the importance of the recovery week here to dissipate all the building up, the fatigue that had built up over this time. Okay, so this takes us into subphase 8. It's a developmental subphase with the 3-to-1 loading plan. Now, for endurance training, we stick with the 2-minute intervals, but we reduce the rest slightly. Now, up to now, I've been recommending only whole body movements for these sessions, like running, for example. But as we're in the fight-specific preparatory phase, we want to start incorporating more fight-specific movements. So to achieve this, we keep the same work-to-rest ratio, but simply start swapping out running for MMA-specific movements for that work interval. This might include pad striking, for example. Now, for the resistance training workouts, we tend to stick with the traditional movements, but in this case, we're progressing with our workout and adapting, so we're going to decrease the repetition range to somewhere in the region of 7 to 8 reps, and we're going to be going through about 3 to 6 sets, and so we're going to need to increase the rest to make sure that we're trying to dissipate some of this fatigue from the added weight. And you can see this pattern continues here in the next 2 workouts. There's your endurance workout, and then here's your resistance workout. And then that takes us to week 27. So we increase training difficulty in week 27 by increasing the number of sets performed in the endurance training session. So now we're working with somewhere in the region of 8 to 10, and resistance training stays roughly the same. So here's the resistance training workout. You could see the mirrored endurance workout, and then it's the same resistance training workout. And then we're into week 28. Now, we increased training difficulty in week 28 by increasing the number of sets performed in the endurance training sessions up to 10 to 12. And again, we also added a fight simulation for 3 rounds, and the resistance training in this week stays roughly the same. So let's have a look. There's the resistance workout here. So we're 7 to 8 reps, 3 to 6 sets, 75 to 90 seconds rest. And those 2 workouts, they repeat themselves. There's your endurance workout. Now, here you see that the endurance workout, it's running in particular. The first one was running in particular. I think it's important to go back and forth between MMA specific movements and some of these whole body movements, so you can work those in as you like. Some fighters like to have one endurance workout per week dedicated to MMA specific movements, and the other one is whole body movements. It's up to you to decide. As you move through the fight specific phase, you want to certainly be incorporating more fight specific movements, such that by the end of it, you're doing a lot of fight specific movements. And again, here's the fight simulation that I mentioned, so you can have a look at that. So again, it's another pretty tricky sub-phase. So these recovery weeks are very important, and we continue with the same pattern with the endurance recovery and then the resistance workouts, mostly focusing on Olympic lifting technique, which again, we're going to be getting close to here. Okay, let me just slide over a little bit. So as we move into the fight-specific preparatory phase, we move into sub-phase 9 here. And this is our second shock sub-phase, and it's the 3-to-1 loading plan. So as we move into another shock sub-phase, we move down to the 90-second work interval range for endurance training. Now, again, there's a lot of ways that you can work this, but the way that we've been building this in this fight plan is the first workout, it's generally a whole body movement, and then the second endurance workout, we generally try to feature MMA specific movements, but you can tweak those things accordingly as you prefer. So you can see here, that's our endurance workout, and you can see the first one, it's the whole body movement, and then we move to the second one, that's an MMA specific movement. If we move to the resistance training here, we're working in the 6 to 7 rep range, 3 to 6 sets, 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes off using workout A. And then we move over to week 31. So the increasing training difficulty in this week, it's achieved by increasing the number of sets in the endurance training to 7 to 8, as you can see here. The resistance training structure, it stays the same. So you can see here. And then for endurance workout, it's back to the MMA specific workout for the second workout of the week. And then back to the resistance training pattern. Now, the big difference here is that we've decided to incorporate a fight simulation at the end of this second week in the sub phase, in the shock sub phase, because we really want to make it difficult. But as we move into week 32, what we're really looking at here is a repeat of week 32 with a flat loading plan. Everything is pretty similar as the last week. But again, this is a very difficult training week. We have our high intensity endurance workouts, whole body, for the first one, and then again, it's whole body for the second one. You can do MMA specific as you like. We have our resistance training workouts here, 2 of them, and then we have that fight simulation again. So this is the hardest sub-phase yet, with really 2 very challenging shock weeks. So again, this recovery week is very, very important to dissipate all the fatigue that's built up from this very difficult shock sub-phase. So as we move through this fight-specific phase, we continue to increase intensity by lowering the endurance work interval. Here, we're working with, as you can see, 60 seconds. This is complete, in this case, 6 to 7 times in week 34. And again, we have a whole body session earlier in the week, and then the next one is going to be an MMA-specific session. For resistance training, you can see here that we've dropped the repetitions. Now we're working in the 5 to 6 range, and you can see the rest. It's 2 to 3 minutes, and the number of sets, 2 to 6. For week 35, we increased the training difficulty primarily by increasing the number of sets in the endurance training sessions. Here we're going for 7 to 8. The resistance training structure stays roughly the same. And again, the same thing that we've done last week, we've incorporated a fight simulation towards the end of this week, so that makes it pretty tricky. Now here, the rest between each block gets reduced from 60 to 30 seconds, and this time we're going for 5 rounds. So this is a very challenging week. And as we move into the next week, the number of intervals in the endurance training increases from where we were at up to 8 to 10, and the resistance training, it stays about the same, and the fight simulation, that stays about the same as well. So you can see the pattern that we've moved through. And then as we get into week 37, it's our recovery week. So as we move on, we get into subphase number 11. This is a shock subphase with a 3-to-1 loading plan. So again, we find ourselves back into another shock subphase, and this one it's pretty demanding. Now for week 38, let's have a look here. The work interval drops down to 50 seconds for endurance training with 8 to 10 intervals completed. For resistance training, the rep range lowers to 4 to 5, and the fight simulation, again, here it's incorporated every week. So we see the endurance workouts mirrored, the resistance workout mirrored, and at the end of the week we have this fight simulation. Let me move over a little bit here so we can see. And so what we've chose to do here is we have a leveled loading plan across all 3 of these weeks. And it's a very challenging load that I just walked through in week 38, and that's just repeated in week 39 and 40. So let's just have a quick scan. There's your endurance workout, here's your resistance workout, and then both of those are mirrored right here later on in that week. And then we have the fight simulation. You can see here, again, it's the same thing as we've done in week 38. And then in week 40, it's the same thing again. Just scroll through so you can see. And then we finish off that week with the fight simulation. And again, now recovery is absolutely imperative here during this week as we're starting to get closer to that fight camp. And so this takes us to subphase 12. It's a developmental subphase, but this time we're working with a 2-to-1 loading plan. Now, I wanted to schedule a shorter subphase here to build in more rest before the fight camp. So again, we're looking at a shorter or smaller 2-to-1 loading plan. So let me scroll over here. So for endurance training, we're looking at work intervals. It drops to around 40 seconds. Resistance training, it drops to the number of repetitions 3 to 4, and so that's the first resistance workout. This is purely a strength workout. Now as we move here, we see the endurance workout stays the same, but as we get to this next strength workout, you see that the workout is now workout D. Before it was workout A. We've really only been working with A, B, C workouts. As we get to here, we start to incorporate workout D. That means that it is a power-based workout. Now, if you need a refresher on the difference between strength and power training, you need to go back and rewatch that lecture on the science of MMA. The big difference is that you're doing different types of movements in the workout Ds. They're more power-based, and you're focusing on different types of loads. So you're going to be using slightly lighter loads, because in power workouts, it's all about moving the load as fast as you can. So again, go back and watch the relevant lecture if you need a refresher on what that is all about. Now, as we move on to week 43, the training difficulty increases, and it's primarily achieved by more intervals in the endurance workout, and you're also adding a fight simulation with less rest between the blocks. So here you can see now we're up to 8 to 10 intervals, and then we're back to workout B for the resistance work. And again, the endurance workout is mirrored. It's MMA specific this week. And now we're using workout E, which is also a power-based workout. So that's very important. You need to be moving between strength workouts at the beginning of your weeks and then power workouts at the end of your weeks with a very similar rep scheme. And the other thing to note here is the fight simulation. It's adjusting slightly. We have 30 seconds rest, 30 seconds exercise, 15 seconds rest, multiplied by 5 for 5 rounds, 60 seconds between each round. So it's getting more challenging, and we have another recovery week here for week 44, and this should set us up for the fight camp. So let me slide on into the fight camp. So for subphase 13, we're looking at another shock subphase. This takes us into our fight camp, and it has a 3-to-1 loading plan. Now, the first 2 endurance workouts feature 4 to 8 30-second work intervals. As you can see here, there's your next endurance workout. And for the resistance workouts, the first one focuses on muscle endurance in the 12 to 15 rep range. And then you can see here the second resistance workout, it focuses on, here we're mostly working on 3 to 4 reps. But the important thing to note here is that it's with workout D, which means it's a power workout. And then we have a fight simulation as well, you can see here. As we move into week 46, we have endurance workouts. Here we're doing 6 to 8 30 seconds on, 1 minute off with 30-second buildup. And here, our first resistance workout, it is workout A in the 3 to 4 rep range. That means we're focusing on strength in this workout. And then you can see here in the same endurance workout. But when we get to our second resistance workout, we're in the 3 to 4 range, but now we're in workout E. So again, it's a power-based workout. So in the very first week of the fight camp for resistance training, it's a muscle endurance at the beginning of the week, power at the end of the week. Now it's strength at the beginning of the week for this week 46, followed by power. So in this way, we're starting to incorporate all of the different performance factors from a muscular perspective as we start to prepare for that fight. Now, as we move into week 47 here, let's just bring this up. So the first thing to note is that for endurance training, the work interval drops to 20 seconds in week 47. And we're doing about 7 to 10 sets here. And again, we're back to, for our first resistance workout of the week, muscle endurance. And then for the endurance workout, it's a mirror of the first endurance workout, again, MMA specific movements. And here we're doing a power-based workout always towards the end of the week, 3 to 4 repetitions. And then you can see the fight simulation. The big difference in this fight simulation is now we have no rest between the blocks here. So that becomes very, very difficult. So again, this is a very difficult training period, and we're hoping that this significant training period with both high intensity and high volume will bring about an adaptation for your fight. So as we move into subphase 14, we're looking at a developmental subphase with a 4 to 0 loading plan. So in week 49, again, as we move into this fight camp, intensity continues to increase. So for endurance training, we're competing 10 15-second intervals for the first session and 15 6-second intervals for the second session, as you can see here. Now, the first resistance workout focuses on strength with 2 to 3 reps, while the second focuses on, you can see here, it's a power workout, but the same repetition range. And at the end of this week, there's also a fight simulation with no rest between the blocks. So that's a very difficult week again. Now, as we move into week 50, training difficulty, it's increased, and this is primarily achieved by increasing training intensity. So the first endurance session features 15 10-second intervals. And if we move over here, the second features high intensity workout using 6-second intervals. And if we go back to resistance training, right here. So the first resistance training session focuses on muscle endurance in the 12 to 15 rep range. And I'm sure you know the pattern and what to expect here. We're back down to 2 to 3 reps, but this is going to be a power-based workout. And again, we have another fight simulation here with 0 rest between the blocks. And then as we move into week 51 here, training difficulty in this week, it's mainly achieved by increasing training intensity. And so here we're focusing on 15 5-second intervals. And the second session features a high intensity workout using 20-second intervals. As we move over here, you can see that 4 to 5 20-second intervals. For resistance training, we're doing a pure strength workout, 2 to 3 reps with workout B. And then our second resistance training workout of the week, again, it's always going to be a power workout. In week 52, the increase in training difficulty, it's mainly achieved by increasing the work interval duration. So the first endurance session, as you can see here, it features 7 to 10 30-second intervals. And the second session, it features 15 5-second intervals. You can see the pattern of rest here. The first resistance workout, it's a muscle endurance workout, and then the next one, the next resistance workout, it's a power-based workout, 2 to 3 repetitions. And again, you can see the fight simulation here. I just wanted to make one point here. Again, using the fight simulation this far into your fight camp, there's not much benefit to be had here. Some people use it more for mental preparation. Some people really feel like they need it. Just be cautious. Make sure that you're trying to lower the volume here. So maybe you don't have to do as many rounds as you're moving into week 52 or so. Now, this takes us into the taper here. And the taper is a very, very important period. Let me just move over a little bit so we can see the remainder of the fight plan. Now, as we move into the taper, we really need to focus on lowering training volume. So for endurance training, we're looking at 6 to 7 sets of 30-second intervals. That's what we'll do for the first session. And then we're looking at 4 to 5 20-second intervals for the next session right here. If we move back to the resistance training session, what you're seeing here is the first resistance training session focuses on muscular strength. It's in the 2 to 3 rep range. And then the next one focuses on, again, it's a power-based workout in the same rep range. And there's also a fight simulation here. But again, you need to be very cautious when you're doing this. You should really be reducing the volume, decreasing the number of rounds that you're going through, or just getting rid of the fight simulation entirely if you're feeling slightly fatigued. Now, in the final week of the taper, in week 54 in this example, the number of training sessions, it's cut in half. The only endurance session features 15 5-second intervals. And the only, as you can see here, and the only resistance session, it's a power-based workout in the 2 to 3 rep range. Again, there's lots of rest built into all of these workouts as you get closer to your fight. Now, hopefully, as you've decreased the training volume significantly in those 2 weeks before your fight, you'll dissipate fatigue. But because you're training at a high intensity, you should prevent any detraining effects. And that's really what we're trying to go for. And so after the taper, you've had your fight, and then you move into what we call the transition. In this example, it's subphase 16, and it takes up weeks 55 to 60. So after the fight, the main focus is on recovery. So you're looking at a combination of low intensity endurance workouts, and really you're focusing on muscle endurance and resistance training. So let's just have a look at some of these workouts here. The first workout back after your fight, again, it's a recovery workout essentially. And as we start to move through these, you can start to see the types of workouts that we're moving towards. The main thing is you want to stay away from MMA-specific movements. But again, these are very similar. So here's a muscle endurance workout. There's another basic endurance whole body movement workout, another muscle endurance workout. Let me just scroll over here so you can see where we leave off. Some non-contact intermittent high intensity effort. Maybe this fighter liked basketball, so that's what they did. And back to a whole body endurance workout, resistance workout, muscle endurance. And we're slowly building intensity as we go through this transition period. So here we have our first incorporation of an endurance workout, an interval training workout. We're working with 5-minute intervals, which, if you recall, that's what we were using at the very beginning of this fight plan. We want to make sure that we're building intensity as we move through this transition to get us ready for the next fight plan. So here's our resistance workout. Again, our load is 6 to 12 repetitions, and our endurance workouts, they start to become a little bit more intense. As you can see here, endurance workout, another interval training workout, and then a broad range of reps here. And then here it takes us into our next fight plan. Okay, let's get back to that lecture and conclude. Okay, so that's it for our example, and here's a quick summary of everything that we did, and as you can see, we really did a lot. I hope that this session put everything into perspective for you and gave you confidence in programming all these workouts that I showed you across your entire fight plan. Now remember, once you've gotten this far, scheduling workouts across your fight plan is just as simple as matching up your current phase, your training phase that you're in right now, with the associated workout and the programming across your fight plan document and just slotting them in. You should also remember that you really only need to be programming workouts 2 to 4 weeks out from where you are now, because so many things can happen in just a few weeks. You can really waste a lot of time if you plan too far and then have to go back and change all of that. So really you only need to be programming just a couple weeks out from where you are now, and maybe just the sub phase that you're working through. And that's really why I recommend that you keep on coming back to this session, because I showed you every workout across the fight plan. You really just need to skip to that part of the video where you're at in your phase and just follow my example, and you should just be fine. After all, this isn't rocket science. There's no one right way to do this, and I hope that gives you some confidence to experiment. There certainly are some wrong ways to do this, but again, if you just follow my example, I can promise that you will be rewarded with peak performance on fight day. So that's it for us. Let's leave it here for now, and I wish you the best of luck and success. Take care.